morning. So good morning, everybody. I trust that you are all ready for this day. I am definitely looking forward to our session today where we are going to be auditing. We're going to be auditing bank and cash, or as the standard or the section is called these days, cash and cash equivalents in our Caseware file. So I am very excited. We are almost feels like we are finally getting our hands dirty in this series of auditing sessions. We started out with the introduction to Pro Caseware session. Then we had the how to do a stock count, and I'm sure most of you have now done stock count, seeing that we are already on the 8th of March today. So you would probably had at least one, if not many, stock counts over the last 2 weeks, which of course is also why we didn't have any sessions back then, plain and simply to give you an opportunity to get through all those stock counts. So I hope that was a roaring success. Right. Then what we are going to do today is literally work through a client scenario, literally work through a section, as I said, cash and cash equivalents, and really start to get our hands dirty in how do I use the Pro methodology to get my work done. All right, so we'll just have a quick look at seeing who is my client, what is the name of our client, who are we working with, and this will be the same client that we're going to work with next week when we tackle the auditing of general expenses, and then in a few weeks' time when we tackle, I think it's first employee costs, and then we are also going to end off these detailed sections with related parties, other income, and there's another part, I think opening balances or something. I can't remember the other part, but we will still be going through a few of these sections. So firstly, if you do feel a little bit lost today, don't worry, the recording will be available. You will be able to actually go and pause the recording and do what you need to and get going again. So today, of course, we only have 3 hours and it's already it's already 9:05. So we are going to work at quite a pace today, but you are of course able to take the recording and pause it and see where you are, what needs to be done when you are doing the work yourself, or maybe when you want to revise it. All right, so if I am going a bit fast, you're welcome to ask me to show you again. However, we do have quite a bit to get through, so I might speed up some of the parts. All right, so we're going to look at who's our client and then audit the actual section. And I want us to really take a section the way you would do it in an audit. So we're going to start looking at the risk assessment procedures that were done, where they are documented, how you can either start documenting it. In some cases, you might be expected to do the documentation, and in other cases, it's possible that someone else may already have done that, and you're just going to update that or read it to get yourself up to date as to, firstly, what has already been done, and secondly, the information that is already learned so that you can just pick up from there. And then we're going to look at the system description, see what happens when we are looking at that, and then start tackling the procedures in the work program. All right, so that's what we're going to do today. Just as a reminder, all the attendees are muted, but you are please welcome to use the question function. So I've already received one question, so that's fantastic. Thank you very much. And then if your signal is lost, that does happen from time to time, then please just exit the webinar and re-enter, and you should then be able to actually start and connect again. So that is hopefully not a problem. Good. Then I just want to repeat again, if you have not received the material yet, I want us to just make sure that everybody does have the material. So just have a look in the chat function. I provided a link there for you. I am going to check before we start the material, or before we jump into the section, so that should also be fine. Then I've already said as well that the recording will be made available, so you will be able to access this recording. If I remember correctly, we make it available on YouTube, but also the fact that you are logged in today will also make sure that you will get a link of saying thank you for attending the session, or acknowledging that you've attended the session, and then of course with a link to the recording. All right, and then with that now already, I want to say, remember, if you are not registered for next Friday's session, where we're going to talk about expenses, make sure that you get that session, get registered for that session. I'm also sure that the marketing team will ensure that everybody that is registered on today's session will also be notified. But next week, we're going to do a similar thing to today, only, of course, we're going to focus on a different section with different risks and different challenges in that section. Right, so let's then do our first poll. I want to just make sure then that everybody does in fact have the material available. Do you have today's material available? So it looks to me like we now give you the opportunity. Do you have today's material? Have you downloaded it? Please indicate in the poll for me if you have downloaded it. If you have not yet downloaded it, then you can click not yet, and then please just make sure that you go to the chat section and quickly download that. The reason why I made those links available early this morning is also because the download function does actually take a lot of your bandwidth, and so you might not be able to hear me so well while you are downloading it. You might not be able to see as I move along in the session. So that's why we rather do this double, triple check right at the start and make sure that you do have the material. I just want to quickly see the questions. I did see there was a discussion about where the download is done. And that will go to your download section. Of course, unless something has been set up differently in your file, but generally when you click on that download link, you will be taken to the section where you'll be taken to the section where you download it. It will go to your download section, you'll extract that file, and then in there you will see the relevant parts. So in our poll, I see 65% of people have already downloaded it. The 35%, let us take you through that quickly. So I'm not necessarily going to share that, but I am going to just quickly close that. You can close the poll on your side as well if you want to. I'm not going to share that with you now. We all know who has struggled. So once you've used that link on the chat, it will take you to success.casewareafrica.com, and this will be the page that you're going to see. You're going to scroll on. You might not even need to scroll down. There's a little folder here with a blue bold that says download your learner files for the session here. You literally click on it and it will start downloading. I'm going to insert the link in the chat again. It looks to me like not everybody is seeing that chat yet. So let me include the link again. I see a question of somebody that says, I only see the slides. So the slides is something that you can download as a handout from the material, but that you don't actually need for our physical participation today. So that's just the PDF. So what you need to go and do is you need to actually look at the link in the chat. So where you are asking questions, and that same space somewhere, there's another area that says chat. And in there, I said this morning, early already, I said, good morning, welcome to today's session, etc. And then I've now included 3 links there. The first link that I added at 8:40 was one to my team, so that's not going to help you. But the other 2 that goes to success.Caseware Africa, that link is the one that takes you to this website and where you can then download your material. All right, so just make sure you've got that. It looks like most people have the link now and are able to get that. I do see someone's raised their hand. I wonder if you shouldn't just type a question for me. Yes, the folder is 213 megabytes, please. That's why it can affect your quality of your sound. So I will just give a moment for you to download that. Okay. Good. So it looks like most people are able to, and if you are not, please continue to submit questions. I do have a colleague from the consulting department that will help you to find the link and to download it and to get ready. All right. For the rest of us that are all ready and good to go, I want us to just have a look at one or two more of the polls, just so I can get to know our delegates for today. So the next poll that I want to ask you is asking you, where do you fit in? What is your what is the word, demography for today's session, just so that I can see what our audience looks like. And so the first option is, are you a first year trainee? Of course, the session is scheduled or is planned with first years in mind. So I'm always very excited about everybody attending. We have a lot of people attending today, but I'm especially excited when we have first year trainees or trainees who have never audited bank or cash and cash equivalent and are therefore quite keen to well, just to get started. You will see we are going to go very, very basic today. So maybe you're first year, maybe you are still in your training contract, but not a first year, so second, third, final year. Maybe you've completed your training contract and you want to maybe just have a look at the material that we are doing and how we are presenting it, and then maybe distribute the recording with your delegates, with your trainees in your firm. That's also fine. So maybe you are a supervisor or manager that's completed your training contract. Or maybe you are at an audit firm and you're not completing your training contract and still want to learn. That's every single one of you are welcome. But I just want to get an indication of where everybody is fitting into our delegates today. And of course, there is also an option for other. So I'm always very curious to know, where do you fit in if you don't fit into any of those categories. But if you do, please still feel free to complete and say other. And of course, you are also welcome to, in the questions, just tell me what is your role in your firm at your employer, so that I can also understand that. And of course, perhaps if there is a question from you later on. So already I see quite a good distribution. Only 60% of delegates have voted so far. So please do complete the poll so that I can just get a good indication of where we are. Okay, we're on 70%. I want us to go for 80% at least. Of course, I would prefer everybody to participate, so please just complete the poll and give me an indication of who you are. Okay, I'm going to give another 5 seconds. We're almost at 80%. Let's make it to 80%, please. It's not a trick question. I just want to know who we are working with. All right, good. I'm closing that poll just for everybody also to see and to know who are your colleagues for today's session. We have 30% of the delegates attending today being first years, 34% being more senior than first years, 24% managers or supervisors, and then 6% audit firm non-training contract, 6% other. All right, so welcome to each and every one of you, and thank you for letting me know where you fit in, so that we can also just bear that in mind in our development. Good. And then the next part before we get stuck into the material is, of course, whether you attended the introduction to auditing session in the probe, of course, focused on the probe one. That was presented the 7th or I think it was the 7th of February. So it's basically 4 weeks ago today. But I just wanted to see whether you do have that background of the material. If not, you might want to go watch that recording if there are some points that we mentioned today that's a little bit confusing or that's unfamiliar to you. But I just wanted to make sure whether you either attended it or watched the recording, which I'm glad to see some people did actually watch the recording, so you caught up if you weren't able to attend the live event. And then, yeah, I see a few people have not yet attended that, and that should also be fine. So please, I do think that we will still be able to show you quite a few interesting things today. It's definitely more an introduction. It was not a prerequisite. Right, we've got about 50% of people voted. Please, let's get to 80% again. It's really fantastic to get your participation so that I can see your responses and really get to understand who I am talking to today. Okay, we've only got 56% voters. It's a pity I can't hand out a prize for a poll completion because I can't see who's responding. So really, it is an anonymous response. You are welcome to respond with an honest answer. I don't have any trick questions in a poll later on, but if you did have something later on that you wanted to respond to, of course, you're welcome to also add it to the questions or the to give me input. But yeah, you are just free to respond to the polls today with an honest response. There is no name attached to your response. We only have 73% voted. We have increased from 56, but please can I ask you to also complete the rest? I do realize that some people are still downloading the material, but also I do expect that a lot of you would already be done with that and are now able to respond to the poll. So please let's complete the poll so that we can get stuck into our Caseware file and our client. Right, we're almost there. Just give me an indication so that I can know how many people did attend the introduction to probe session, so that we will know. Good, right. Okay, it doesn't look like we're going to get much further than 78%, so I'm going to close the poll now. And just so that you also see, in case you were curious, 83% of the 82% of delegates said yes, they attended the session. A few did watch the recording afterwards, so that's fantastic. And then 15% of you have not yet watched that. So as I said before, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. You can still go and watch that recording. It is still available. And at the same time, if you haven't yet watched it, I am sure that you will still be more than able to participate and get a lot of value from today's session. Right, so now let's go and have a look and see who is our client. Who are we going to audit today? So our client is called Wrap Up Manufacturing. They provide or manufacture wrapping and food containers. So if you think about, maybe sometimes you go to a little corner shop where you maybe buy a freshly made sandwich that's already in one of those triangular shaped containers, plastic containers. That's the kind of thing that our client makes. Maybe some other bowls with lids, things like that as well, but that's generally what they manufacture. So we definitely have a client that has stock. They get raw materials, they've got stock that is work in progress that they are busy making, and then we've got finished goods. And of course, everything that goes with that. They've got a factory, they've got factory machinery, they've got staff that work in the admin office as well as in the factory and so forth. Right, their financial year end. Oh my goodness, I see I wrote there 2024. I apologize. It's 30 April 2023. I'm going to fix it right now. Otherwise, I am probably going to forget to fix it later on. Oh, goody, no, hang on. I'm not going to be able to fix it. And there's too many buttons to press. Okay, so let's leave it. I will remember. But you know, we have a financial year end, 30 April 2023. What financial reporting framework is the client using? IFRS for SME. So that's perhaps a new challenge for you, is to know that our clients can generally use either IFRS or IFRS for SME to prepare their financial statements. This client chooses and is allowed to use IFRS for SME as their financial reporting framework. Right, and then the accountant is Andy Crack. So we are going to work a lot with Andy. We are going to hear a lot about what he does. There are also, of course, other staff, but I thought I'll just start off by saying Andy Crack is then our regular contact at the client. Okay, so we're going to be auditing cash and cash equivalents, and included in there then, of course, is all your bank accounts. We're going to have some petty cash in there today. And I thought that before we just jump in and start completing work programs, let's just sit back and say, right, where is the information coming from? When we are auditing that section in the balance sheet, where does that information come from? So first of all, then the financial statements. So we're going to, the client is going to have financial statements. In reality, most of the times, the client don't have completed financial statements the moment we rock up there for the audit. They might have some drafts, or they might have their prior audit financial statements, and we can at least see what it looked like last year. So at least before we sign the audit report, of course, there's going to be a set of financial statements. Now, where does that come from? Well, that is prepared from the trial balance and other supporting documents. So, for example, you will use the balances that's recorded in the trial balance, but you will also use other documents like perhaps the facilities letter to have a look at whether there's any securities that maybe need to be disclosed, whether they've all been disclosed, whether they've been disclosed appropriately, etc. And then where does the trial balance come from? Well, from the general ledger. And where does the information from in the general ledger come from with regards to cash and cash equivalents? From the cash book. Now, what's the cash book? The cash book is basically the client's ledger, if you want, or detailed ledger or detailed book, where they record all the transactions that happen in the bank statement, but in their accounting record. So it's almost like not really a copy, but if you want, a copy of the bank statement, but in their internal records. And for those of you that had accounting at school, you might still remember that maybe you had some processing done in the cash book. I remember I definitely did. Now, I certainly hope that I'm not giving away my age if you don't do that in today's world anymore. But yeah, the cash book is then something that you will also be using to prepare the financial statements ultimately. All right, and then, as I said, we use the bank statements to prepare the cash book. So in order to see where did the stuff come from that's going into the cash book, you will refer to the bank statement, which of course is an external document. And well, what goes into the bank statement? Any payments made and received when there are actions such as purchasing inventory, buying the coffee that the staff drink, paying a creditor, paying an employee, etc., etc. So all the money movements, if I can put it that way, goes into the bank statements, which is then captured in the cash book and ultimately lands up in the financial statements. All right, so that's just the flow of the transactions. And then another thing that I thought we should just bear in mind is the fact that when we are auditing financial statements, we started off by saying that our client uses IFRS for SME. And why is that specifically important? Well, because the accounting framework, IFRS for SME, prescribes how cash and cash equivalents should be recorded. And so it's important for us to be familiar with the accounting framework. So those of you that are perhaps doing your training contract or have completed your training contract, I'm quite sure that many of you probably studied accounting standards. Maybe not IFRS for SME, but definitely the IFRS standards. And so you might have thought to yourself, this is so difficult. Why must I learn that if I'm going to audit it? Well, the question is, how can you audit something if you do not know what should be there? So the what should be there is what we get from the accounting standard or the financial reporting framework that tells us the client should recognize, remember that section that says recognition, recognize bank balances or liabilities or expenses or whatever it is that we are looking at. Recognize those if these conditions are met, so the recognition requirements, and then measure them at certain points in time in certain manners. So you have your initial measurement and your subsequent measurement. So subsequent measurement mostly then is what we use or how we record the financial statements or how we value the items, in this case, cash and cash equivalents, the bank balances at year end. So when the transactions happen in the bank account, that is often then, it's your initial measurement, and then your subsequent measurement is, well, at year end, what are we required to record? And of course, a bank a balance is a bank balance. So as long as that is, for example, in South African Rand, and we are reporting in South African Rand, there's really not much that's going to change the balance in the subsequent measurement stage. However, if that balance is denominated in euros or American dollars or any other currency other than our presentation currency, well, you know, then at your end, you are going to have to restate that with the exchange rate at your end. So that's really where it becomes important. But so I wanted us to just have that as an initial thought, so that when we are auditing, we don't get stuck in, oh my word, this is what the work procedure asks me. I'm not sure what to do, how, where, what. Just sit back and say, what am I doing now? Where am I in this process? And so again, the slide then basically just says that right in the beginning of the audit, there on the slide it says 1020, but it could have been any other number for us for that sake. Right at the start of the audit, we indicate what the framework is. In our case, IFRS for SME. And then as we start working in our section, we will indicate whether the accounting policies of the client is in line with the framework that they say they are using. So if the client says, I'm using IFRS for SME, but this is the accounting policy, we need to go check if the accounting policy that the client is using agrees or aligns or complies with the IFRS for SME standard. Because if the accounting policies are not the same as what IFRS for SMEs says, no matter what they did later on, we cannot say that their financial statements are in line or fairly presented in terms of IFRS for SMEs. So that's the first step. Financial reporting framework, we've checked that that is appropriate. First step, the accounting policies that they're using, are they in line with the framework? And then we go and we say, what did they actually do in their bookkeeping there? What are they showing in their accounting records, ultimately in their financial statements? Is that how they went ahead to actually go and account for the stuff? Is that in compliance then with their accounting policy? Because we have determined that the accounting policy is in line with IFRS for SME, and therefore we can say that their financial statements and their bookkeeping is in line with IFRS for SMEs. All right, so that's really just what I wanted us to just think about at this point in time. Good, so now we are ready to get busy in our Caseware file. So I want us to go and open Caseware. If you haven't opened it yet, open your Caseware file. And then sign in. If you have not yet signed in, do that now for me, please. Just want to open my delicate view file properly. Good. And then make sure that the name that you use to log in is indicated here at the bottom, just off center from the middle on the bottom right hand side. You'll probably also know from Sandine's sessions on Caseware that is where you will see who you are logged in as. Right. Okay, I'm going to assume that everybody's Caseware files are open now, or if you decided not to worry about the Caseware file and rather just follow what I'm doing, that's also an option or a possibility. But for now, I'm assuming that you were able to open the Caseware file and log in, and so you are probably then also seeing what I'm seeing now. Okay, because I'm going to be looking at my second screen, I'm actually going to switch off my webcam now, but of course you will hear me, so you will know that I am still here. I haven't gone anywhere, and so you will be able to follow with me. All right, so we're looking at cash and cash equivalents. And what are we seeing here? So if you opened your Caseware file, you're probably seeing something like this with a lot of lighter type of items, and then of course your bold folders. And I know you've worked a little bit in Caseware, but let me just quickly just show you what the audit section, at least, of the file looks like. So from the top, we've got firm template setup and things like that, fund trial balance, financials. But when we get to engagement working papers, this is really where we are going to get stuck into the audit file. We then have the finalization section, and if you open the folder, you will see that there's a lot of stuff in there that talks about subsequent events, declarations, review notes, going concern, conclusion, misstatements, key audit matters, etc. Okay, so that's for your finalization of the audit section. We're not going to worry about that too much today, so we can actually close that folder again if we want to. Now, maybe if you're wondering why in the world does the Caseware file start with the financials and then finalization? Surely you start at the very beginning, like that song. No, in the olden days when we had Caseware file, hard copy files, partners preferred to have the financial statements right at the top of the file. I still remember Sandrine having this picture of a dinosaur with a hard copy files. Now, yeah, in the dinosaur age, when we had hard copy files, the partner then wanted the financial statements to be right at the top of the file so that he or she could look at that first and then move on to basically the conclusions made as part of the finalization stage. And then right at the end, or not right at the end, but after the finalization session, then to start getting stuck into the planning. What did we get initially in our planning? Then our risks, what was our response, planned responses, and then the actual detail, the actual field work later on. All right, so what does this look like in our Caseware file? So we already have the finalization section. Next up then is basically the rest of the file. So again, the folder called engagement working papers. And then our planning parts. So we have 3 folders here. Section 10 being pre-engagement. Okay, and that's typically where we will decide whether we are going to take on the audit, things like that. Planning and risk assessment is section 11. And then we have audit planning, which is basically section 12, where we have the audit plan and strategy. So that's not so much sections 10, 11, and 12 that I would expect you to have to work too hard in up to now. But we are going to open 1 or 2 of the documents to see what it looks like, where we go with it, etc., so that we can at least have that background when we go into our individual sections. So in some cases, maybe in a few months' time, someone might expect you to start completing these sections by yourself. But I would say at this stage, it's probably wise to at least sit with someone when you have to complete it, or get very good guidance from someone when you have to complete this, so that you are sure that you are following the right approach. From a Caseware perspective, we are assuming that a first-year trainee and junior is not expected to do that. So I'm not going to teach you too much about the detail of the planning, but I will give you some relevant pointers before we start the field work. All right. Then after the planning parts, we then get to a section that is called lead sheets and working papers. And this is basically all that detail that the field work is going to contain. Every single section in the financial statements will then have a section here. Now, first of all, we have a folder called General Working Papers. Now, if you open it, I'm not sure if yours is open or closed. You can just press that little arrow part. But things included in here is accounting records, working paper, financial statement preparation. So those are general work programs that we will complete for every audit, but they don't have specific risk assessed to them. So in all audits, we need to go check the accounting records. In all audits, we need to go and make sure the opening balances are correct and the comparatives are correct. So for all audits, those sections will be relevant. There's no ROM attached to them, risk of material misstatement. They are just all there under the general working papers section. All right. Then we have sections basically according to the financial statements. So you will then have a non-current asset section, which shows you all the non-current assets, the long-term assets if you want, or the fixed assets, which is your PPE and your investment properties and your goodwill, and you name it, all the way through for each of your non-current asset sections. And then we've got current assets, which of course is where we have our cash and cash equivalents. Also trade and other receivables, inventory, and so forth. Okay? And then after all the fours, we have the 500s, which is non-current liabilities, current liabilities, income statement, equity. I'm just going to close them for you. And then other disclosures. In fact, let me open it like that, which is where we then have related parties and a few other items which are disclosures, but are not included in your balance sheet or income statement. All right, good. So that's really the layout of our file. So normally before we start in an audit, we will have a planning meeting. And if you are not invited to the planning meeting, and it's maybe just the partner, the manager, or sometimes the partner, the manager, and the third year, then you will be able to read the minutes from the planning meeting, which gives you some information already of what the partner has communicated, where risks have been identified, etc. Today, we're not going to have a planning meeting. We are not going to read minutes. We have limited time. So where there is relevant information, I will give you that information as if we had learned that information at the planning meeting. All right. So where are we going to start in this file? We now need to start opening a document. So which one is it going to be? So where we're going to start is in the section 10. So you can either scroll up to your file, which is definitely something I would personally prefer, is to go up to my pre-engagement planning section. And from there, I'm going to see the relevant document. However, as you saw, there are lots of folders. And so very often we don't know where to go look for something, especially these different sections. I mean, can you remember what the section of cash and cash equivalents is? I can know because I've obviously prepared for it. So I know it is section 420. But now later on, we also have to go and look at the section for overdraft, the bank overdraft, the liability. I didn't go and check what that section number is. So if I want to go and get something like that, that's where I can then use my Control F function. So literally, while I'm in my Caseware file, I press Control F. And this little screen pops up, and this is where I can then go and say, where do I want to go? So I can either say something like cash and cash equivalents. Well, I'm just typing cash here. And then click next. So I make sure I look for things in anywhere, and I match any text, and then it will give me all the possibilities. I can say match the case of the words, go and look in specific areas, things like that. But for today, I'm just going to, just to show you the point, you can just search or look for or find cash, and it will take you to the cash and cash equivalent section. Of course, as I type next, it will show me the individual documents as well, which of course is quite a lot now. Every time I click next, it moves to the next one. Once I've gotten to the bottom one, then it will give me an error. Just want to actually get to that. That says the item was not found. Basically what you need to read in there, lower in this document. Do you want to go to the very beginning or the very top of this Caseware file and start searching again? Yes, I want to start searching at the top again. And there you can see there's some stuff in the financial statements. And then I'm back at cash and cash equivalents. Okay, so that's your find function. So what we are going to go to actually is we are going to work in the document numbered 1051. So you can scroll up. You now know it's in section 10. You know that folder is already open, so you'll probably see it quite easily. Or in my find, I'm going to type 1051, click next. Well, I'm now, look where I am. I'm on 420. So 1051 is higher up. So it tells me to the bottom of this document, there is no 1051. Do you want to start looking from the beginning? And I say, yes, of course, go to the top and show me from there. So I'll click yes, and it will take me right to the top there where we have in pre-engagement 1051. That's it. That's exactly what I was hoping for or looking for. And that, of course, then is the document where we're going to start. So you can open that document. Mine is going to just take a while because I haven't opened it before. I opened a number of the other documents before, but not this one. So a colleague of mine refers to the mesmerizing blue circle. I'm also seeing it just on another screen. So just double click on 1051 and give it a moment to open that document. Good stuff. Mine's open now. Right, so this is a case view document. And what you will notice is that my document map is on. So more or less well, it's under the navigation part of the ribbon at the top. That's called document map. Now, when I press that, you will see the section on the left hand is going to disappear. That whole section with all the little bookmarks. So if I click document map, the bookmarks disappear. If I click it again, it comes back. I'm personally quite fond of the bookmarks because it helps me to jump from section to section quite easily. It does, however, only show you the activated sections. Now, in most of the planning sections, only the sections with balances in the current or prior year do actually have activation. So I can also activate a blue section if I want to. If I right click and say enable the section, and it will actually then make it white. So I have activated Goodwill by right clicking and saying enable the section. And then I can start completing the stuff, etc. But I'm going to disable it again because there is no Goodwill in our section. But other than that, I can almost, I want to say ignore, but I'm cautious to use the word ignore. I can almost ignore the blue sections and just focus on the white activated sections. Now for today, of course, we want to work in cash and cash equivalents. So you can now either scroll down to get the cash and cash equivalents section, that's just to the bottom of my screen, or in some cases, the section you're going to look for is going to be much lower down and you're not going to know where to scroll towards. So one option could be to say, well, right click and collapse all the sections. You can see the property, plant and equipment section is currently collapsed because it's closed, but it's white. But the cash and cash equivalent section, you can see there's stuff happening there. So if I was to collapse everything, all of these will just be blue backgrounds and I'll easily see the white action sections. But we know we're going to work in this section very soon. So there's actually no point in collapsing the section. So what I'd rather want to do is I want to use my document map and say, let's see where cash and cash equivalents is. Oh, there it is, fourth from the top. And I will just click on that, and that's going to take the cash and cash equivalent section right to the top for me. You see that? All right. Good. So now we can have a look at what was already done in this file. Now, remember, I said our assumption is that as a junior, you are not expected to complete the section. So someone else, perhaps our manager is called Helen, by the way. So perhaps our manager has already completed it for us, or maybe one of our senior team mates has already completed it for us. So let's just have a look at what we have in this document so that you know what you are looking at. We have a few sections in here. The first one is basically the balances. So where we can see 2023, 2024 balances, we can see a percentage change with a space for comment. Now, just a quick note on that. Firms can choose where they want to do their analytical review procedures. Our firm chose to do the analytical review procedures in 1051. The alternative, if you're curious, is 1052, the very next document. We're not going to do it there, so we're going to do it in 1051, and that's why we have the comment spaces. Now, what did Helen already say here? I'm going to show you where she found the information, but let's just see what she's already documented. So cash and cash equivalents, the 4.9 versus last year's 8.4 million. Sure, quite a drop from last year. She says there's no unusual balances noted on a lead sheet and no unusual transactions noted in the general ledger, except for the information below. Okay, and then the categories of cash and cash equivalents that we have is the cash on hand, petty cash basically, and the bank balances. Bank balances, nothing, and then there's a story. We will look at the story just now. So where do these amounts come from? Well, this line with a blue that looks like a hyperlink is in fact a hyperlink, and that is a hyperlink in all of these sections. That's the hyperlink to the lead schedule. So I can just click on that and it will actually open my lead schedule for me. Going to just make the size somewhat bigger for us to see somewhat better. Right, I wonder if it's big enough yet. It doesn't look very big for me. I'm going to open it like that. I think that's going to be better on your screen. So this is now the cash and cash equivalents lead schedule. Can you still remember what the lead schedule is? The lead schedule is just a little, almost like a zoom in or a screenshot of a part of the client's trial balance. And what is that zoom in section? That's the section that's relevant to our section that we're auditing right now. So these are all the balances in our client's trial balance that's been mapped to cash and cash equivalents. All right, the balance is there, 4920. You can see the 1998, which is the petty cash or cash on hand as it's called, and then the bank balances. And here the interesting thing is you've got two bank balances with money in last year's and this year's balance. And then you've got this line that is called net bank overdraft facility. Last year it had a positive balance. This year there's nothing. Okay, remember an overdraft can also be a liability. So it's also possible, and we'll go and have a look to see, hang on, what's maybe in the overdraft, the liability section. Is there perhaps an overdraft facility balance? And in fact, there is. So let's just quickly go back to our Caseware file, and I'm actually going to just go to section 620. So if it helps you at all, the cash and cash equivalents, if you want to make a note of it, the balance, or rather the asset section that we're going to work with today is section 420, and the liability section is section 620. So if I'm going to go there, bank overdraft, and I can have a look at the lead schedule, which is also 620. Double click on that 620 that is called bank overdraft, and there you will see the same bank account. Remember our trick from last time? On this screen, I will just use Windows left, and then on the other document, I'll use Windows right. Let me see how I can do this now. Surely I should be able to. There we go. Okay. So the bank overdraft facility, the bank overdraft facility that's zero in the current year, but that did have a balance in the previous year. What's that account number? 5410. And then in the other lead sheet, the one for the bank overdraft, that same account number is now on the liability side, a negative 3179. So what does this really tell us? Because look there, under the 2022 year, there was no balance. So what this tells us is exactly the same balance. It's just that last year, the previous financial period in, we had a positive balance. And at the end of this audited financial year that we are auditing now, we have a negative balance. So one account, and we call this a flip of an account. So it flipped from a positive or an asset to a negative or a liability, yet it's exactly the same account. We can still audit it, and it is still cash and cash equivalents. All right, so that is what we've seen here, what is happening. We are going to, of course, check that the balance is correct and all those things, but just for now, for you to note the overdraft facility. Okay, I'm going to go back to 1051. We had the lead schedule. We saw the balances. Now, if you want to maybe just have a look at, let me make these now smaller again. So the balance of total cash and cash equivalents, 4920,135 is exactly what I see in my lead schedule, and the same for the prior year. I'm not sure if you've been told this, but just in case you are wondering, I completed my training contract many years ago, but also using Caseware. And I think I was almost done with my training contract before I knew what the rep column stood for. So in my mind, that is the reporting amounts or the reporting values. So you'll see what was reported in April 2022. That is your prior year column. And what is at this point in time going to be reported in this year is your rep column, which of course is not necessarily your final number, but that is your reporting amount. So that is the sum, basically, if you want, from the preliminary values that you imported as the trial balance and the adjustments that were made. That gives you the reporting or draft reporting numbers, if you want. At this stage, we obviously haven't even audited them yet. Right. Good. So that's where that comes from. Now let's go and have a look at the client's actual general ledger to see what is the story that Helen wrote there for us. Some of you might have read it already. I know how it works. You're a delegate, you're always curious, you want to go read it. So let's go and have a look at what Helen found in the general ledger. Now go to your probe support folder for me. Okay, so in there you've got 8 documents. I've numbered them for you so that we know that they are all in the same format. So you can just sort them by name. They'll go 1 to 8. And if you open number 8, it's an Excel document with the cash and cash equivalents general ledger accounts. Now, I must say we are very, very, very spoiled today because in preparing for the material, we have already cleared this account and only included the relevant accounts that are mapped to the section today. So if you get a general ledger from a client, what you would normally find is you are going to have, I don't know, thousands, if not millions of lines, and all of the accounts in one GL. So where do I see the accounts? Well, what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually just going to number the or highlight these. So I just highlighted with my arrow on the left-hand side, and then just chose any color there in the theme colors, just to show this is an account heading, if you want. So all the information that comes below that, that's all part of the same account. So what I like to do when I start with the general ledger account is actually to just do that. Go and then I say, oh, there on line 453, I have another account number, and I just also highlight it so that I know that's where the new one is. Okay, you don't have to do it too if you don't think it's necessary. We're not going to do too much tricky work here. But I am going to show you a few things on the GL account, and I think this is just going to be easier if at least my screen shows you the headers. So there's another account, Nedbank call account. Let's see if there's another account here. There we have a last account, current account, and then we have the end. The rest of the file is blank. Okay, so we've got 4 accounts in our general ledger. Now, what we wanted to look at was, of course, the petty cash. That's the call account. There's the petty cash. All right, now let's just think about how does petty cash normally work. And I actually want to switch on the camera here so that you can see me. I can't necessarily see the stars in your eyes, but hopefully your seeing me is going to also help. So petty cash generally works in this way. You have a box or something where the money is kept. But that is normally topped up to what we refer to as a float, a top max amount. So we always like to keep, let's say the firm chooses 5, 6, 4, 3,000 Rand, an amount. That's the float. And so at a regular interval, depending on how often they use the petty cash, let's say every second week, the person that's in charge of the petty cash will go and have a look and count how much money is left in the petty cash and see, okay, we should have 5,000, that's our float amount, but I've used money to buy stamps, if you still use stamps, buy milk for the kitchen, buy this, buy that, pay this, and whatever it is, I make my little summary and I see, oh, I have spent 1,500 Rand. So what am I expecting to still have in my petty cash? Well, 5 minus 1.5 is 3,500. Count the money. Yes, I have 3,500 Rands of cash in my box. I can show the slips that makes up the rest of the 5,000 Rand, and I'll do my little petty cash slip, whatever the case is, and I request a reimbursement, if you want, to the petty cash of that 1,500 Rand. And those expenses are then recorded in the book, in the cash book, in the ledger, somewhere there, to say we've spent 1,500 Rand and this is what we spent it on. At the end of that exercise, my petty cash box has 5,000 Rand again. So that's my float. So what you would expect to see in a client's petty cash is that every time money is paid, you can see there petty cash, petty cash, petty cash, each of these, they're all the same. What you would expect is rather that every time a payment was made, that the total balance would in this case be the 4, the 5, the 6,000. That's not what this client does. Now they don't keep a set limit or a set amount as they float. They rather pay in a set amount of money into the petty cash every now and again. And so they are paying in 4,000, 4,000, 4,000, 4,000 at any time. And then also what our manager Helen found was that there's this one that says petty cash Mallorca brands cash 5,000. So that was, and I think there's another one as well. Yeah, Jason Ark, petty cash 4,000. So that's whenever clients pay cash for the sales, what they buy from us, that money is not deposited into the bank, but rather put in the petty cash, which is it's not ideal, but it's not wrong. So that's really what's just a little bit funny in this GL account. All right. So you can, if you want to, you can still go and audit it. If we look at this, there's about 69,000 Rands worth of money put into the petty cash during the year, which is really not all that much. If I go and just have a quick look at, sorry, I should have probably given you this beforehand, but our materiality, which we'll see on the work program as well, is the performance materiality for this client, as well as the specific materiality for the cash and cash equivalent section is 800,000 Rand. So 69,000 Rand is not even an individually significant amount. Of course, you can still go and audit it. You can still go and check if it's appropriate, if it's correct, but it's not showing any issues of any fraud, of any specific risk of material misstatement. It's just the way the client does it. Okay, so that's then the analysis of the petty cash. Let's go and have a look then at 1051. What did Helen write in our analysis, our review of this balance? So in cash on hand, our petty cash, she now wrote and she said, we inspected the general ledger account and identified that the client does not make use of a fixed float. The top-up amounts are usually 4,000 or 5,000, and the cash is used and then top up as necessary. If cash is received from a customer, which is under 6,000 Rand, this is also deposited in the petty cash box. This is in line with how they did it in prior years, and no unusual items were noted. Right, so that's fine. We're saying, well, it's not really how we would expect it in terms of a textbook way of doing it, but no problems identified, happiness, moving along. All right, then that was the first section of basically our analytical review. Now we go and we do risk identification or risk assessment procedures, and this is basically what we would do. So first of all, the manager or Helen or whoever completed the section indicated how did we go about identifying risks? Well, we had inquiries with Andy Crack on 17 June after year end 2023, and we inspected the general ledger accounts, which we did just now, and then performed the procedures that would normally identify possible risks of material misstatement. Reviewed the trial balance, looked at the accounts, and she said no accounts appear to be incorrectly mapped. The mapping is also consistent with the prior year, because if we map accounts differently, that's going to result in inconsistent balances from year to year, which won't be comparative. No unusual accounts have been noted, And then in terms of comparing account balances per category with previous years and getting reasons for unusual changes, there she did see that the accounts fluctuate year on year and no consistent balance is expected. The overdraft facility has changed from a positive to a negative balance, which is not unusual, and as this is essentially an overdraft facility. Then reviewing the underlying accounts, we inspected them, no unusual items identified. Petty cash did not reflect as expected, but we've documented they're not keeping a fixed float. And then this is the part that we spoke about in terms of IFRS for SMEs, to say, is the client's accounting policies appropriate and consistent with IFRS for SMEs? So there, the Helen went to go look at the accounting policy for the cash and cash equivalents in last year's financials, and it is consistent year on year. Of course, we're in the planning stage now. If we had final financial statements or draft financial statements for this year even, we would not have gone and looked at last year's financials because it's possible the client could have changed their accounting policy. We would prefer to go look at this year's final financial statements, or at the very least the drafts for this year's. But if both of those are not available, sorry, just a sneeze that overcame me. But if the final financial statements or the draft financials for the current year is not available, then, well, then we can go look at last year's financials, and of course, towards the end of the audit, just make sure that we aren't missing anything. All right, and then in this case, there is also a block for transactions and balances, and this is where you will start modifying your work program if there are specific accounting policy choices or specific scenarios. In our client, there aren't any accounting estimates such as fair value estimates because all the bank accounts are actually denominated in South African rand. But if you did have a foreign bank account, well, that could then have been where you would have ticked this on, and then there would have been procedures in the work program for the accounting estimates related to cash and cash equivalents. It also prompts you to go and discuss some stuff about ISA 540, the auditing standard on auditing estimates. But we don't have any of those, so I will untick that block and it will stay as is. When we audit general expenses and employee costs and those things, there will be some extra stuff reflected here. All right, so we've done what we needed to in terms of the risk assessment procedures, the types and volumes of transactions for cash and cash equivalents. Okay, we can close this document, and then we know we've done a bit already and we are happy to go. All right, it's 10 o'clock now. I'm going to just, actually I can keep the lead schedules open. I wonder if, I think I closed the other lead schedule. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually let us have a break. Sorry guys, now I'm clicking around. I'm going to go back to the document manager. I'm going to let us take a break. My clock says it's 10:05. So we're going to have a break, 10-minute break. Get your coffee, get your water, run around, wake up, do what you need to, and then we will start again in 10 minutes time and carry on auditing cash and cash equivalents. Right, welcome back everybody. I want to just make double sure that you can all hear me. So if you wouldn't mind just going to your GoToWebinar dashboard and just have a look. There's a place where you can actually put up your hand. And then just put up your hand for me. Okay, great. Thank you. I can see a lot of hands going up, so you can definitely hear me. That's fantastic. And you are back, of course. So that is great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I can see you can hear me. So I'm not talking with a muted setup. So thank you very much for that. Right, then we're good to go again. All right, so before our quick break, we had a look at the risk assessment procedures that were performed, and we had a look at 1051 where it was documented. Now let me just go back up again to our sections. So that was 1051. Okay, so what we will see next then is actually in 1160, this is where the risk was recorded. Right, so where the senior or our manager recorded risks for cash and cash equivalent in 1160, that's where they would have recorded these risks for us. And you can go and have a look at 1160 to see what it is that they had recorded. Mine is opening, slowly but surely. It does take a while whenever we open these documents, and the reason is actually quite simple, because it checks, almost when I say behind it, you know, the way that you would walk across the road. Before you cross the road, you look, what's it, right, left, right, left, right, left. I can't remember which way right now, but you look both ways and sometimes repeatedly. So what the document does is, as it's opening up, it actually refreshes itself and checks both ways, both to documents that's before it to see were there any changes. Let's say, for example, in 1051, where we were just now, and should I actually change the content that's reflected in 1160 because of those changes. And then at the same time also, it does also look slightly ahead to maybe see where it can go and change things on that side. So that's really why the document takes, almost want to say, relatively long to open up. And of course, you can also see there's lots of sections. So for each of those sections, it goes and checks it. So if you are one of those delegates that works in these documents often, it's best to rather keep it open, maybe rather just minimize it rather than closing the document. So minimize, of course, being that little teeny tiny little line rather than using the cross to close the document. All right, let's have a look then using our document map. We go to cash and cash equivalents and we see what was done there. Click on the plus sign to open the document. I'm also just going to increase the size slightly for us to see it properly. All right, so here you can see there's a lot of risks recorded. Now, I must just put a big qualification here. I would be very surprised if many of your audit files will always, in every client, have this number of risks recorded for bank or cash and cash equivalents. We've tried to record a number of risks here. If you want to go have a look at the document, want to go see where the risks are, what procedures open, etc., they are there for you. But I wouldn't expect every file to have this many risks recorded. You may or may not be aware that the auditing standard ISO 315 risk assessment basically changed about 2 years ago, where basically, well, with that also the audit response standard then said that you only actually have to perform procedures in those cases where you have identified a risk. So we don't have to audit every single assertion anymore. So in the past, our audit work programs would then have just listed assertions, rather procedures for all assertions. Now, the way that the probe work programs work is they will only switch on or show work procedures for those assertions where we have recorded risks. And that's why when we set up this course, we actually indicated the risks for more than just the one or maybe two that you would generally expect in an audit file. Of course, there'll be different ones in different engagement setups, but we recorded a few of them. All right, so that's you can see the risks recorded there individually, and then again a link to the client's lead. You'll see the little red dot here. That red dot indicates that that balance exceeds overall materiality. So just generally also giving you an indication that you will at least have to do some work there, without going into too much detail about how we plan, how we record risks. And then just also, this is where we then would have recorded the client's specific materiality for this section. And by default, it is your performance materiality that's just pulled through, but of course you can change it. Right, and then the inherent risk assessment at assertion level is then the highest risk assessment that has been recorded in the table. Right, so that's why you will see a low risk for completeness. We hadn't recorded we did record a completeness risk there. Not all bank accounts are recorded. EO, those ones are also low with risks recorded for them. All right, good. So that's then 1160. Now, what's interesting then is that from 1160, we then go to 1220, which is our audit plan and strategy. Now, if you've studied auditing, you would have had lots of the questions that says, document your audit plan and strategy for auditing this section, that section, etc. So that's what we're going to have a look at then in 1220. 1220 then showing the plan for auditing cash and cash equivalents. Right, there it is. I'm just going to increase the size for us and just have a quick look at the, I was going to say the top part, which is always the same, which has the overall information. So you will notice that the first 3 lines right at the top is inherent risk at financial statement, fraud risk at financial statement, and then control risk at financial statement. So these are basically your overall risk assessment documents or summaries thereof, showing where there's a low risk, no risks recorded, whatever risks were recorded, etc. So you can have a quick look at that. That's not what we're going to be too worried about right now. I want us to maybe just have a quick look at the risk at assertion level, that overall audit consideration. So this is where we are saying, overall, for all or any of our sections, are we planning to use evidence prepared by a management expert? And for our audit today, we're saying, no, we're not using a management expert, so there won't be any instances where we need to do the special work to confirm if a management expert has the necessary capabilities, whether he's sufficiently objective, etc. The same with an auditor's expert. We won't be using the work of an auditor's expert. We also won't be obtaining any external confirmations, like, for example, debtors confirmations, or maybe those are external confirmations, so obviously not something like an inventory certificate, but any other confirmations that we might have in other cases wanted to do. We're not going to get those. So we switch that off. And then lastly, we also decided we are not going to place reliance on work performed by another auditor. This would, for example, have been one of those cases where we would have said yes if we got another auditor to go and do a stock count at another branch for us, right? And then we would have indicated that requirement or that use of that other auditor in this inventory section. But we're not using another practitioner at all. And so therefore, already here, we are just switching it off and saying no. Okay, then if we use the document map or just scroll down, either way, to go to the cash and cash equivalent section and open it up using the little plus sign, what we will see in our audit plan and strategy is now basically the strategy of what work we are going to go and do for the section. So our inherent risks recorded in 1160 is coming through here. We can see those clearly. And then combined with whether the balances are material and the overall risk assessments, we can also see what the conclusion or overall, not overall, but the risk of material misstatement at assertion level is. Now, if you're starting to wonder what's happening here, if you can't remember or you weren't at the introduction to probe audit section, don't worry about it. Let's just go, almost want to say go with the flow here, with the medium 1s and medium 2s. But if you can't remember, or if you didn't attend, go back to that recording on the introduction to the probe methodology, and you will be reminded there are these triangles that shows you how we determine ROM, how we address it, what are the different risk levels, etc. You will see that from there. Okay. We also then see the specific materiality and our desired audit risk set as low. Again, we did discuss that in the introduction to probe. Not too critical at this point, but just so that you can see you do have access to those in this document. On the left-hand side, audit considerations for how and when we are going to audit cash and cash equivalents, where we'd already given the responses to the overall responses or considerations. Those are automatically putting through those first 4 ones. And then we have the option, if it's appropriate, to tick extra sections or extra bits. So let's just see what they are. So first of all, this one that has a little block for us says, do we want to include or change the nature and the timing of substantive procedures, including the unpredictability thereof? Now, this really refers to one of our responses to the fraud risk. So we don't have to do that for our bank necessarily, and in fact, today we're not going to choose that. But it might have been that we said, oh, they've got a very big petty cash, or there is a lot of money that flows through petty cash, which is not the case today, but it could have been. And we said, yes, we want to do something. We want to change the nature and the timing. Let's include some surprises for them, so unpredictability, and go and do a cash cow, for example, okay, which we don't normally do. We've never done it before, but we're going to include that as an element of unpredictability. We're not ticking that. We're not saying that's what's going to happen today, but that could have been the case. Then the question of whether we are going to place reliance on the audit on previous years' tests of controls. Earlier on in our planning, we'd already decided not to, so that won't be a case or relevant section for today's audit. We did not have any specific laws or regulations that may have a direct impact on the amounts or disclosures in cash and cash equivalents, and so therefore we won't have a separate section for that. We might have that in other audit sections that we're going to do in the future, so you can just have a look at that as we all bear it in mind. Essentially, that is saying that, well, probe can't imagine every single law or regulation that our client may need to comply with. And so if there are specific procedures we need to test from a legal perspective, let's say, for example, for employee cost of PAYE, perhaps, I don't know, or that or something like that, we might want to just tick that and make sure that we add in enough steps, or if check that there are enough steps in the skeleton of the work program already. We're not going to perform a cash count, we said, and we decided not to obtain a bank confirmation for today. Right, so that's the audit considerations. You can have a little field there to make documentation. And then on the right-hand side is the audit procedures. Now, again, from the introduction to the probe methodology, you might remember that there are basically 6 overall responses in which we can respond to the risk of material misstatement. First one being, if we did record a significant risk, we will have a significant risk response. We did not have any of those for cash and cash equivalents. Test of controls, we did not consider controls in this scenario. And so therefore, let me reword that. We did not decide to rely on any internal controls, and therefore we are not going to test those controls for operating effectiveness. What we have to perform are the required procedures for or to address the risks recorded. The standard uses words directly in response to the risks recorded. So we have to perform the required procedures. We have not yet decided whether we need to perform any extended analytical, extended test of detail, or substantive sampling. So we could always go and switch them on later on. But at this stage, we are just going to do a plain, simple audit using the required procedures to respond to the risks recorded. All right, so that's what we can see then for the cash and cash equivalents audit strategy. All right, good. Then we can close that, and then we are going to start looking at the audit itself. So let's go to cash and cash equivalents now, section 420. You can either scroll there or you can use your Control F to search. Good. Now, what do we have in this section? Every section would normally start with a work program. You can see that number is .10. You will sometimes have additional work programs in cash equivalent. You have an additional or separate cash work program for the cash count. In inventory, you might remember we shared that extra work program with you for the inventory count. So those steps are not provided in the, let's call it the standard inventory work program. There's an additional one for the inventory count attendance. If we were to get external confirmations for the trade receivables, there'll be a debtors confirmation work program. So there are a few of those extra ones. Then they are normally 0.11. There's always the lead schedule, which we've already looked at, which normally is the same number as the section number. And in our case, then we have a number of extra documents in here. In fact, I quickly want to just delete some of these because I'm going to add them in with you later on. And I do think that you don't have them yet. Right. So what you should have in your file then, in your client file that the client, that your manager gave you or shared with you, is then the cash and cash equivalent system description that we're going to look at shortly, and the bank reconciliation working program. All right. So let's open the cash and cash equivalent system description. That is the description where the client said to us, how does transactions and events, if there are events, how do they enter or get recorded in the client system? Now, I'm not going to go all ISA on you, but if you were to go and look at the ISAs, they would then tell you in there to say things like, how are transactions initiated? How are they approved? How are they recorded? How's the monitoring of those, that those transactions are appropriately done, and so forth. So that's basically what we do. So if you have a look at our system description, I just want to quickly open up that document, you will see that we've included little headings to say payment processing, loading of new beneficiaries, receipts processing, etc. Now, if you were to go back to older files, let's say we are in 2024 now, our audit for today is 2023. So maybe in 2019 or possibly even a financial year that was still working in 2020, in our lovely lockdown year. In those years, we still had checks. And so we also then did not just have internet payment or internet banking type of procedures. We also had a section for checks. Who approves the checks? Who writes out the check? Where are the checks kept? Etc. 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 Okay, so those are all gone. But if you were to go and look at a relatively old system description, you might have also found those in there. Can I ask you, if you open a client file from last year, for example, and they are still talking about checks there, you can obviously have a look at their system description from last year as a guidance or a starting point for your new system description this year. But please, don't just copy and paste everything that's in there from last year. Something like the checks it's a giveaway that you did not actually go and ask yourself whether this is appropriate. Check and update the information, perhaps with a client even, and say, is this still what the system is like? So nobody tells you you must start from scratch to document a system description. Of course, the client's also not going to be very fond of you if every year someone comes to them and says, please, can you tell me how you record transactions in your cash and cash equivalent section or in your cash book, or who looks after the, or whatever it is. But year one, when it's a brand new client, you might ask them that question. Year 2, 3, 4, etc. You're going to say, can I please ask you a few questions to check whether the system is still the way that it was last year when we came to audit? And then you use last year's one and you ask, how is this done? Is this still done this way? Does Jackie still do that? Does Susie still do this? Does Peter do that? What is Peter's role in this now? Things like that, especially if you knew that, let's say, Peter was actually promoted from bookkeeper to financial accountant or something. Then things would have changed there, and you need to see how that was updated. Okay, dead giveaways in this case is often where, you know, everybody knows Peter's resigned and is gone, and your system description still says Peter this, Peter that, etc., etc. So that's your dead giveaway, that you did not actually update it as necessary. I see a little point coming in there. I think there's a, oh, I see, yes, there's a typo in my system description. No, please, it's loan payments, not load payments. Sorry, No, he does load payments. So there is another typo somewhere. So well done on that. Andy Crack has the rights on the banking system to load payments. So the way that it basically works on internet banking is if you and I just make a payment, we make the payment and we say pay and it goes, right? Because it's only your bank account or it's only my bank account. But in a payment system for a business, there's often at least two people that is involved in this. So the one person will load it up or record it in the banking system. Let's say that's me. I'm the accountant. I will process it in the system with my username, my login details, and I will then say, right, it's now ready for approval. And let's say we've got more than one Alexander here, so I'm not picking anyone specifically, and then Alexander will maybe be the financial manager or the bookkeeper or the accountant or the controller or whatever your title is, Alexander, but you will then get a notification to say UNA has loaded the following payments for your approval. Please go into the banking details and go and approve those transactions. And that is then the person that will release those payments. So if you then look at records of the banking or of the payments that were made, you will often then have one user code that says, this is UNA's user code, she loaded the payment, and this is Alexander's user code, he released the payment. All right, so yes, it is to load payments. So let's just have a look then at what do we have on these working papers. Firstly, we have our client, or our audit firm's name. Our audit firm is called Fletcher Inc. We have a reference for the working paper, and this is added manually at the moment. Of course, if you do have Caseware Connector, you can add all of these in by Connector. I chose specifically not to have that because not everybody does use Connector. You will have sign-offs of who performed it, which will be your and my names, as well as the dates by when that was done, who reviewed it, which will probably be Helen, our manager, and if there's another person, maybe a partner or someone, they will also have a space for final review. We always have the client's name, the financial year end, and then what is this that we are looking at? And so in this case, it's the system description. Then if we have discussions with people, we always have to say who that was. And actually, theoretically, you should also say that it's the accountant. So there you see personnel involved accountant. So then I guess we don't have to say discussion held with Andy Crack, who is the accountant on 24 June, just to say 3 lines further down, Andy Crack is the accountant. But the challenge, of course, is with movement of staff, with the, if somebody does leave or join or is promoted, then nobody would necessarily know who Andy or Mr. Smith or John or whoever was when they just read the system description. All right, so that's our personnel. Stefan Harper is the director, and let's see how they process payments. So Andy has the rights in the banking system to load payments, and these payments are then released by either Andy or Stefan Harper. Okay, so maybe there's already some alarm bells going off in your mind saying, oh my goodness, so Andy can actually load a payment and then pay himself, actually authorizing it himself as well. Maybe you've thought that far. Andy will then pull a bank statement from the system regularly and process those transactions into the accounting system via the cash book. Bank reconciliations are performed monthly. Okay. Then next, who loads new beneficiaries, new people that may be paid? So Andy and each of the directors have the rights to, there's our load, hey, to load new beneficiaries, not loan new beneficiaries on the banking system. Receipts processing, well, it's the same as payments processing. So the people that process payments are also the ones that process receipts, which is Andy and Stefan. Who monitors this? Okay, so Andy does everything himself, but at least Stefan has a look at the bank reconciliation. Every month he looks at the bank recon and he investigates reconciling items as well as agree the bank reconciliation to the underlying documents. Great, but there's no evidence of that. So he says he does it, but how would us as auditors know that it was actually done if there is no indication? He doesn't sign off a register of bank reconciliation reviews. He doesn't sign a physical bank reconciliation with his signature. He doesn't maybe go on the system and says, tick, I've reviewed the bank recon, anything like that. There's no evidence for us. So we cannot necessarily rely on him actually picking up errors. Maybe he's just telling us, oh yes, he reviews it, but actually he just checks, yes, there is a recon, and he moves on. He doesn't actually review the detail. Right, so that's not the greatest monitoring procedure for us, but at least they say something's happening. So maybe it's not the biggest problem. In terms of journal entries, these are also passed by Andy. So they are passed to account for interest that's accrued or fees that are charged on facilities like bank charges, things like that. And then Andy simply processes those journals on the accounting system. So that's the system. I'm quite sure that you are probably feeling a little bit uncomfortable with all the different access and rights that Andy has. And the theoretical or the fancy term for this, of course, is that there isn't sufficient segregation of duties. Now, that in itself is not necessarily a problem, because if it is a really teeny tiny business, then, well, there's only going to be one accountant, and that he or she's going to do everything. Yes, of course, you would want Stefan to maybe be a bit more involved, but it's not always realistically possible. But we need to be aware as to the fact that there is an opportunity for Andy to possibly manipulate things. So without sidetracking too much, you might be aware that in terms of fraud and the risks of fraud, one of the biggest indicators that there may be fraud happening is when there is an opportunity for someone to perform fraud or commit fraud or perform activities that ultimately ends up being fraud. So yes, this is something we need to tell management about and say, guys, you might not realize this, but actually this is a problem. Okay, but that's the understanding. Now, after we've documented what the client does or how they do the accounting, let's first then go and do our walkthrough procedure. So the standards refer to considering the design of controls, as well as the consideration as to whether they are implemented. So when we do walkthrough procedures, we could also say that we are checking that they are implemented. However, at the same time, we can also say by walking through the process, we are actually also checking that what the client told us is we understood that correctly. We didn't just hear what we thought we wanted to hear. We did actually understand that correctly. All right, so walkthrough procedures are not always required. You will basically listen to your firm in terms of their policy. So there is an option in the standards to say that whenever you get a system description, you can choose to go and do a walkthrough. And there is, in the planning section, there is a specific, I almost want to say a switch, where firms can decide whether they want to do a walkthrough or not. In our case, we decided to do a walkthrough. So let's see what we did in this. All right, so walkthrough is taking exactly what the client told us what they do and saying, okay, please can you now show me, walk me through the process. So how did that work? We observed Andy when he logged into the banking system and when he made those payments or loaded those payments that had to be released. We then also looked at how Stefan released the payments through his own login credentials. There's also an accounts clerk, Polly, and we asked her to also try and log into the bank account system, but of course she doesn't have a login, so she wasn't able to log in. So we know that the only people with access is Stefan and Andy, and I guess you could also ask the other directors, but that might be going a bit far. So we do at least know that these two people that play a role in loading and releasing payments, they are definitely able to. So the fact that other directors can load beneficiaries is possibly also a concern, or we might want to consider that. But remember, because Stefan and Andy actually loads the payment, checks the payment before it gets released, that could still be a stopgap if somebody else is loading a beneficiary that they shouldn't. Okay, what did we do after that? We inspected the bank reconciliation that was performed for almost want to call it a random month. And And we then agreed the bank and the cash balances to the bank statement and so forth, and checked that they were all right. We traced the interest received reconciling item to the bank statement after year end, check everything was right. So we're going to actually do that for one of our bank recons just now. But what we didn't see was, of course, we didn't see that anybody actually reviewed it, which we weren't expecting actually, because Stefan says he reviews it, but he didn't sign anything like that as proof. We inspected the user rights listing on the bank system, and please, if your firm does not do this yet, please encourage them to do that. So you go into well, not you ask the client to go into a place where you can basically see the matrix of the banking system, and then see who has what type of access. So we obtained this from Stefan and confirmed that Andy and each of the directors have the rights to load the beneficiaries. We didn't have to go ask each of those individuals to say, show me what you can do on the bank, show me what you can do, can you load a beneficiary? So that will take forever. So you do check some logins, but then to check basically the rights matrix is also what some people call it. You can also ask for that to be done or shown to you on the internet banking. And you then inquired from Stefan if the bank reconciliations are inspected. He said, yes, he doesn't, but of course, there's no proof. Okay, so that is our system description. Now, we want to go and basically inform the client and say, guys, this is not great. This is really not great. What are we going to do about the fact that there is this chance that Andy may be making payments? Now, it's done very sensitively because this Andy might be Stefan's best friend or something like that, and now you are accusing him of actually stealing our business's money. Okay, that's the last thing you want to do. So you have to be very sensitive in how you do that, and you are most welcome actually to speak to the manager or the senior and say, I found this, do you agree that this is a weakness in the system, and can you help me to address this, or how would you recommend I go about addressing this matter? Okay, so what have we done in the Caseware file? In our client, we had considered it. We know this is a case, and the client also actually knows that this is an issue. It's not a new matter, but we want to cover ourselves because this is a significant deficiency. We want to be sure that nobody can come afterwards and say, but hang on, guys, why did the auditor not pick this up? Why did the auditor not point this out? You know that thing. Whenever there's any issue in a client's financials, the first question anybody asks is, who were the auditors and why did they not pick it up? That's always the first question. All right, so what are we going to do? We are going to include this in our report to management where we report significant deficiencies. Now, that is under the finalization section. It's called report to management. So I'm actually in my Caseware file going to press Control F and say report to. All right, and then we're going to go and search for the report to management. The item's not found lower in the file. Remember, that's all it says. Do you want to continue searching from the top of the file? Yes, let's go searching. And then it shows us 0290 report to management and those charged with governance. That's the document I want to open. Yours is going to take a second. I'd already opened mine beforehand. Right, now as it opens up, you will see that firstly, we have a bit of a lettery type thing here. Now, I'm not going to worry too much about what's in the letter. This will often be your manager or your senior or someone that's going to actually monitor what's in the letter. What I want us to go to is the part in the document map that refers to significant deficiencies for financial statement areas. And in there, we're going to go to cash and cash equivalents. Right, looks like most of you can see this. So what we've already recorded then, yeah, is we've already for you recorded a report to management item. Now, report to management items are tricky. You need to word them very professionally, and it's actually a skill that you need to learn. So I'm not going to go into too much of this, but what you can try and maybe try to, I just want to say, upskill yourself, or to try and get better at it, or try to see how this is generally done, is perhaps to go and have a look at other reports to management that was issued. I know of some firms who almost have like a little library of common types of reports to management items. For example, clients that don't consider useful lives and residual values for property, plant and equipment, or the so-called 1 Rand assets. Clients that don't have sufficient segregation of duty, like this one of Andy Crack, and a few other examples. And so then when you have that kind of issue, you can go to the so-called library of report to management items, or the examples that's already there, and basically just amend them from there. So you don't have to start from scratch, because it can be a little bit intimidating trying to write a fancy thing, especially if your English, for example, is not your first language, which, by the way, it is not for me as well. So that is definitely something that can be quite helpful. What I would not recommend is that you do not just go and use something like ChatGPT and say, please write me a nice report to management item, because sometimes those suggested report management items, the suggested weakness, etc., actually contain some nonsense. Because remember, ChatGPT is just a statistical tool that guesses what you want to say. So it's definitely not a professional writer that helps you with it. You can definitely put something in and say, help me to word this better, but you cannot just use ChatGPT to write it for you from scratch. And of course, with that in mind, always bear in mind your client confidentiality and your firm's policy on whether you are allowed to use ChatGPT and things like that. Okay, so please just be cautious of that. But I wanted to also just mention different options of where to come with this. So the way that you might have also in your studies learned how you write an item that gets reported to management is there's basically 3 legs. The first leg is the facts. What is the problem? Okay, what did you find? And that we refer to as the weakness. Then you say, why is this a problem? Okay, so what's the implication for the audit? Why are you as auditors concerned about it? And then to say, well, how can you, Mr. Client, fix it? What is your recommendation of what to do about it? Now, you can't just, for example, say, well, appoint more staff so that you've got more staff to split the duties across, okay? That's obviously not going to work. The client's going to probably chase you out of the office, because if they had more money, they would have appointed more staff, but they don't. So, you know, Andy must just do what he can do. All right, so we need to also be realistic from that perspective. But you can see then there, this item's already been recorded, and we can just close this. If you had to add another management letter point and you were already here, you can literally just click on that little button there that says add another management letter point. Click on that, and then you have space to add another one, etc. This can then be printed to PDF, basically sent to the client. Client can add stuff, and you can also conclude to the client's response to say whether this is sufficient, etc. Right, so that's the report to management after we looked at the system description, and we are now ready to start looking at our work program. You might probably say, finally, we want to start doing some work. All right, so I'm going to do Control F again because my work program is closed, and I'm going to go to 420 and look for the cash and cash equivalence work program. Remember, .10 is always my work program. Okay. All right. Good. So now, just wanted to have a quick look at the questions. I don't see any urgent questions. So now we're going to go to the work program, to the steps that have been decided on. So our risk assessment, again, is just summarized for us here. The assertions is summarized for us here. We do not see the lead schedules in this one, which you might see in other work programs for yourself. So remember, the firms, when setting up their firm templates, have options of what to switch on and off here in the let's call it the introduction or the first part of the work program. So if your firm normally has the lead schedules here to remind you of the balances and it's not showing today, well, our firm template was set up slightly differently. If it was that you normally don't see the risks and now today you do see it, it's because our firm template was set up like that. Good. That's now our Fletcher Inc. firm template that I've shared with you today. Then we have the risks identified that we looked at earlier on in 1160, just showing up again today so that if anybody has to look at it, they can just remind themselves again and know what those risks are. Okay. And then the account balance audit procedures, and specifically then the required procedures. Okay, so the account balance is of course your cash and cash equivalents, and the required procedures are the procedures that we have to do to respond to the risks raised. If you were to go and open up another Caseware file and also record risks for cash and cash equivalents and completeness and existence and whatever risks for these ones, you might end up with wording that's slightly different to what you will see in today's file. And the reason is quite simple, that we've already amended the procedures to be more aligned to our specific, I want to call them reasons for the risks recorded. And that's what the standard requires. So yes, Probe has default examples of procedures that you can or probably should be doing, but also know that sometimes you'll have a lot of procedures for, let's say, occurrence, and not all of them will be applicable to your specific risk that you've recorded. Yes, they might be applicable to your client, but you didn't identify that type of, let's say, existence risk for your specific scenario. And then you can just amend it, hide it, etc. Please, please check with your manager and make sure that when you do that, or when you want to do that, that you do it in line with their policy. So some firms don't allow trainees to modify the work program, only managers do it. Some firms say just change it so that it's most effective. Let me know when you've changed it. Every firm has their own way of going about it. So please make sure that where you believe there's a better way to document it, or you see that last year's work procedure looks different to this year, check with the manager, ask how that can be done so that you can have, I almost want to say, the best version of the work procedures to really align to what you are doing. Right. There are instances where you might have just ticked something differently in planning, and that's why your procedures look differently. So a senior person could also help you identify those inconsistencies, but it is also definitely advisable that you consider whether the procedures need changing in every client's case. Right. Okay, so we're going to audit bank. And we firstly have a step that says, ensure that bank overdrafts are only included in cash and cash equivalents if the overdraft is repayable on demand and it forms an integral part of the business's cash management. All right, now what do we see here? So this is really saying that I know that we've mapped the overdraft to cash and cash equivalents, but are we sure that that meets the requirement for cash and cash equivalent in terms of IFRS for SMEs? IFRS for SMEs does not allow us to just record anything as cash if it is an overdraft, or well, if it's not actually part of the business's cash management. So you can go have a look at what the requirements are in IFRS for SME. There in brackets, you have the requirement paragraph reference, SME 7.2. So if you go read paragraph 7.2, chapter 7, paragraph 2, you will see the requirements there. Okay, we're going back to our GL. Okay, so open up your general ledger again and go find that overdraft facility for me. Okay, it's your first account. I just typed what was it now, F5 or something, and then typed, Control F, sorry, and then typed overdraft, and I came to the top. Okay, so last year's balance was quite positive, and then we see a lot of movement. So what are we looking for? We want to see whether this overdraft is used as a long-term loan. In other words, we just pay back what we need to every month, but actually it's actually just a loan, or are we really using it for cash management? So whenever there's extra money, we put it in, the balance comes down, maybe sometimes even goes positive, and then when we need money again, it goes into the negative. So really used for cash management. So let's have a look at what we see. The cumulative balance, there was an amount paid, it came to very close. Then there was an amount received, the balance went up again, down to zero. Positive zero, positive zero, positive, positive, positive zero, and so forth. Then we actually go into the negative. And so we actually continue until eventually quite a lot further down, still going, we see eventually, this is quite far to scroll, you can see they really use this balance during the year to manage cash, because it's not like a bond or a long-term loan where they just every month there's interest accrued and they pay back a portion, and like an installment, and then the balance stays the same and there's interest and an installment payment, etc. This is really up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. So from that, the manager is comfortable. Helen, the manager, said to us, she discussed it with Andy Crack and with Emily Harper, which is one of the other directors, and they've confirmed that they really are using this as part of their cash management. So it does look like that for us. And so therefore we are comfortable, if we go to our work program again, to say we are comfortable that we have ensured that this balance is only included as cash and cash equivalents, because it is cash management. All right. So exceptions, have we found any exceptions here? What is an exception? Well, where something is not done the way that we would have expected it to be done, or not recorded, there is something different. We came across a funny. Right. In this case, I'll say exceptions, no. There are no exceptions, and I will sign off the procedure with my name and the date, today's date. What you will notice is that because I signed in under my own user, my name is reflected as Johanna Schreder. My user was recorded with a username for my full name and surname. Depending on how you set up, the firm sets up your sign-off, you might also have your full name, you might have a weird, unique ID, maybe something, but hopefully it shows something that identifies you as Johanna, Helen, Alexander, Sue, Peter, whoever you are. Okay. Now, that itself is not good enough for me, because now there's no working paper to reference to, because I didn't go and record a working paper, but I did actually inquire. I did go and ask. I did check the GL. So we want to actually now make a note, insert a comment here to say, what did we do? It's not necessary to go and do a whole work paper like we did with the system description before, to have the client name and the section and the sign-offs and everything like that, just to be able to get to a point of saying, okay, well, you know, we asked, we checked, it's okay. So we're just going to include a comment in the work program. And so if I right click on that procedure and say insert comment, then I can add a comment that explains what was done. And you can see I cheated, I already included the comment before. So I don't know if you want to take a screenshot. There might not be time. Oh, I see I didn't have a necessary space as I needed to. So Andy, Crack, and Emily. You can put any date there. Well, it was last year, obviously, or whenever we did it, when we asked them about it. And we also confirmed that the manager that she checked, and she's also happy. Okay. First procedure, done and dusted. Can you believe it? We've been busy now for almost 2 hours, and we have just signed off our first procedure. So I'm seeing a question here to say, how can I enable that my name shows on the initial and date? So Fancy, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to ask your manager, because in some cases, the firms actually set it up. So what I'll quickly show you, just so that you guys understand where it comes from. Just again, Let me just wait for this to open up. So this here is the probe firm settings. So it's quite possible that you won't have access to this because this is supposed to be limited to either an engagement partner or to the Caseware, what is it now that we call them? Caseware champions. Okay, the template managers if you want. So in sign-off settings here, I have the option of either saying user ID, okay, and that's going to give you a whole lot of blah, 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 blah. You see that? I just call blah, 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 okay? That's what's going to be showing. Or in desktop ID, maybe my initials. But when protection is, or I can choose to show my full name, and then it will be first, last, full name. Or I can have a blank or manual input, and that will then have an input space in certain cases when protection is set up. But because I have a Caseware license that is connected to Caseware Cloud, so it will either have my ID, which is a globally unique user ID for myself. So that's why you see this blah, 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 blah there. Okay, if I have that to show you what it looks like in my work program. Let's go to the work program. If I now sign off, see it's just thinking there. Just give it a moment. Oh, it's still showing my name. You see, it doesn't want to get rid of me in terms of my name. But in certain cases, it will actually use something else. So full name, I think the way I set up my user is so that it never shows that once I want to say nonsense. It's not nonsense. It's a unique user ID globally. But of course, we can't memorize who is XYZ AB157 percentage, etc. No one can remember that. But everyone can remember your username. So it depends also on how you set up your user, how you sign into this Caseware file. I am signed in. Let me show you that. On Caseware, I am signed in as UNI Screder. There at the bottom right, you can see that. And that's why whenever I sign off, whenever I sign off in working papers, then you will see, where am I now? Audit plan. Then you will see my name signing off. Okay, so I hope that clarifies it. Okay, we're going to move to the next step. I hope that addresses your question, Fancy. It might just be that the way that you logged in was perhaps soup or PP or something like that, one of those funny ones. That's a cheat, hey? Or if your firm chooses another way or it looks differently, if you've got those funny user IDs, you can maybe just teach them that they can go and change that in your firm setup. All right, the next step then is to inspect the list of cash and cash equivalents and confirm that financial assets and financial liabilities are only offset when allowed to by IFRS for SME. Can you see that both of these steps, in both of these steps, we started off way back. We didn't even see that part where we said, what framework is the client using? IFRS for SME. Is it appropriate for the client? Yes, it is. That was the first step, which you and I didn't even see. Then secondly, we said, what is the client's accounting policies? Well, there's no policy choice for cash and cash equivalents in SME. So the policy is what the policy is. At some of the other documents, there would have been consideration by the seniors or by the manager to say, is the client's policies appropriate? And now what we're going and doing is saying, well, we're happy that the client's policies are in line with IFRS for SME. Now we need to go and see if they actually did the accounting in line with IFRS for SMEs. So what we're now going to go have a look at is go back to your supporting documents. And there you have point 6 and point 7 that are extracts from your financial statement. So let's have a quick look at the accounting policy. Point document 6, IFS extract accounting policy. Oh, I must move that across. No wonder I can't understand why you're not seeing it. Okay, so there's the accounting policy. First of all, that looks beautiful. If you were to go read it from top to bottom, it's exactly a textbook accounting policy in line with IFRS for SMEs. If we move to the next page, which is an extract from the notes, there we will see that the cash and cash equivalents balance, that is reflected in the balance sheet. So I didn't show you the balance sheet, but the current assets, that's obviously under the assets part of the financial statements of the balance sheet, is 4920, and well, obviously the comparative. Whereas the current liabilities, which is obviously under the liabilities part of the lead schedule, is, well, a liability of 3 million. And the net of those two comes to 1.7 million. So that tells us that because current assets are reflected separately from current liabilities, it confirms to us they have not offset the assets and the liabilities. So going back to the balance, the work program, we have inspected this. So again, insert a comment. We inspected, in this case, the draft note for cash and cash equivalents, and the current assets and liabilities are separately disclosed and not offset. Of course, we can't just assume this is the way it's going to be. So when the final financial statements are made available, we will again be checking that that is still the case. How do we check that? Well, the easiest way is really to go from the draft financials and check that everything stayed the same to the final one. Otherwise, you're going to have to go and look and find all of these little notes in all the work programs to go and check that. And then, of course, in the section or that separate work program of financial statement preparation, there you will sign off a lot of stuff. But the best way to go about this is to double check that users that the drafts didn't change too much. I see now I signed off and it didn't include my name. So now, oh, it was just taking a while. So I'll just sign it off again and then it will include my name. All right. I want us to move on to the bank reconciliation audit, which will be the last step that we're going to do in this work program today. There's quite a lot of things for us to still learn and see in there, but I want us to take another comfort break. I'm quite sure that most of you need a little, just a leg stretch and so forth. So let's take a 5-minute comfort break. It's really, okay, let's say 7 minutes. My watch says it's 11:13. Let's be back at 11:20 and carry on then again. Okay, so we're going to continue with step 3 in 7 minutes time. I will also keep the screen on in case you wanted to have a look at that. I know some of us want perfect Caseware files when we leave a training session. So there you can have a look at the notes that I included in there for your reference. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's carry on. Good. So what we are doing next, we are busy with our work program, and I will just start sharing my screen again. Right. So we've done the part about the bank overdraft and whether it really is cash management. We've done the part about ensuring that they're not offsetting assets to liabilities or liabilities to assets if they should not. And next we are going to audit the bank reconciliation. Okay, so bank reconciliation procedures, let's just read them. They say audit the bank reconciliation at year end. Remember, the client does them every month, so we do have them. And check the costs and calculations. Agree the balances in the reconciliation statement to the lead sheet. So in other words, when the recon says this is the balance at year end. Sorry, looks like my talking is taking a toll on my voice. Okay, then agree the balances in the reconciliation statement to the bank statement. So we'll see how we do that. Ensure the bank statement is in the name of the company, and inspect the bank statement after year end to ensure that all transactions that should be recorded at year end have in fact been recorded. And then follow the reconciliation or the reconciling items to the underlying documentation and ensure that they are recorded in the correct period. All right, so that's the steps that we need for the bank reconciliation audit procedures. Now let's go back to the client supporting documents and see what we have been provided. First of all, we have been provided with the client's bank reconciliations. So we can add these. Let me just open it up properly. We can add these to our audit file if we want to. So there you can see the schedule. It's prepared by the client. It doesn't indicate that to us, but you can see there's one for the current account. There's one for the net bank call account, and then this one, oh, I see they made a typo. It's a discounting facility, but that is our overdraft facility. Okay, so, well, again, the question whether Stefan actually reviewed this reconciliation if he hadn't even noticed the fact that there is a wrong word for the name of the bank account. But let's leave that where it is for now. So you can keep this somewhere. We are going to audit this. Now, if you wanted to, you could actually start making little tick marks on this and, you know, have fun here if you wanted to. Or I'm going to show you a way in which we are going to actually do it on a working paper. So if you go to the Caseware file where we were before, this is section 420. Right, so we had the work program. That's open. We're not going to do the cash count. We've got the lead schedule. We have looked at the system description. And then in here, we have what we refer to as a template working paper that Fletcher Incorporated likes us to use. So Fletcher Incorporated, our audit firm, has provided this working paper template in our Caseware file as part of our firm templates. In some of your firms, you might be creating your own working papers. Some might also have templates that look differently, looks the same, I don't know. But this is what we're going to use. And of course, this is just for us to all make it easier to work towards the same result at the end of the day. All right, so that's what we're going to be completing today or now when we are auditing the bank reconciliation. Okay, so I've opened mine up. I really hope you've got two screens, but if you don't, just remember that when you do have to work, you can always just use your Windows button and click left, and then for whatever else you want to maybe see on the right-hand side, select that or go to that and use your Windows button to the right, and then you can work on both of them. Okay, in fact, I will use this like that later on when we start completing the document. But for now, I just want to show you what we see on this template. Good. So again, client's name or the firm's name rather, who's performing this, and yeah, I'm going to put in my own name. So our initials are normally our first letter of our name and surname. So I'm JS. And then today's date. Oh, and there used to be a shortcut for that. Oh yes, I remember, to put the date in today to make it easier rather than going, oh, what is today? The March, so 08/03/24, whatever it is, you can just use Control and then the colon or semicolon button. You know that button on your keyboard, just to the left of To the left of enter, you've got the little apostrophe, and then to the left of that, or to the right of your owl, that one, puts it in, and it's not a formula. So it's literally today's date. Okay. Then there are others that says equals today, something like that. But the challenge with that one is every time you open it up, it updates it. So if I complete this working paper and tomorrow my manager opens it up, it's going to actually update the working paper sign off date to that day. Right, so that's just where we don't have connected, anything like that. I will sign it off here with that date. Maybe another thing also, I've now put in the date, but just best practice again is actually to only include the date at the end when you are done with a working paper. I know we're going to finish it today, so I'm going to put in today's date. But if it is a document or a working paper rather that takes longer, the requirements from the documentation perspective is you need to include the date when you completed the working paper. So you'll ideally only want to include the date when you have completed it. Okay. Right, so then the client's name, year end, what are we looking at? Well, we are auditing the bank reconciliation, so that's where we are. Thankfully, our working paper template already includes the materiality values. These can also be imported using your Caseware connector if your firm has those. And then the source of our work is the trial balance. So where did we get this information? Well, from the trial balance. So that's just really what we're going to do here. When we're auditing expenses, those things, we might see different sources. Okay, where is this stuff coming from? Well, the working paper reference here. Can you still remember what the working paper number is? Oh, sorry, the work program number. The work program, of course, is our section. If we were to go look here, our section is 420 with a .10. Okay, that's where I find it, right there at the top. Or if you wanted to go to your section, well, that's the work program 420.10. Okay, I'm going to go back to the work program. Which step are we completing now? We are completing step 3 on our work program. So when we do the working paper, we will refer to work program 420.10 step 3. Some firms prefer to only, let me show you there, put in 420.10, and we might remember, oh, now this one wants to use it as general and then removes the 0 afterwards. So I can make it text actually. Okay. Then when I type 420.10, it will keep it as that. Or another way is for me to actually put a little apostrophe and then say 420.10. And then it will show it the same way. Even though my text is general there, the apostrophe said this is text. Okay, so just as a trick there for you to learn what could work best for you. I prefer to use text in those cases, but now sometimes you need to make text, certain fields text and the others are numbers, and then it gets tricky. Right, so that's the work program reference. Where did we get the instruction to do this working paper specifically? On 420.10. What is the audit work that we performed? And that we said was step 3. Right. Some firms prefer that we rather retype all the procedures. Firstly, it's really actually a copy paste from what's in the work program, which could lead to typing errors, things like that. And then also you're already referencing it to the work program. So ideally, again, a manager can actually sit with a work program on the one side and your working paper and see exactly what you have done. So best practice is to just reference to this step in the work program, and then you don't have to copy every single thing. All right, good. We've done that. Now, next up then is to say, what is the risk that we are recording here? What is the risk that we are addressing? Well, when setting up the template, we already know that the assertions or groups of assertions that's going to be addressed is AVA or AVA, which is just the way that I pronounce it just to make it easier, rights and obligations, or RO and EO. But what we need to still complete is the actual risk levels, the risk of material misstatement. So this here is where I'm going to actually start using my different screens and say, let's go and see what was the ROM. To maybe close my document map just to be able to see a bit easier what I'm doing, where I get the information from. Good. So I have to now include the risk of material misstatement for the 3 assertions that are relevant. Where do we know that? That's maybe also another good question. So if I was to scroll down to step 3, step 3's procedures all reference EO, R, and AVA. You see, there's no PD or CO or any of those, so I won't need to include those. I'll only include the ROM for EO, RO, and AVA for step 3. Good. So what are those? EO is not the inherent risk. I look at the risk of material misstatement for EO is medium 1. Then I also need rights and obligations, medium 1. AVA, medium 2. Those are the ones we're going to transfer. So then yeah, I'll just say medium 2, medium 1, medium 1. Sometimes these are going to, when we do sampling or things like that, that's actually going to have an influence. So we want to indicate what is the risk that we are addressing here. In this case, we're going to be doing the bank reconciliations for all the bank accounts. There are only 3, so we're not sampling anything like that. Of course, if you think about bigger companies with maybe lots of branches, which each has their own bank account or anything like that, you might actually just sample some of them. Okay. In this case, we're not going to sample, so we're just saying no sample, testing all, and then the sampling method will be not applicable or NA if you want to. I guess a better way would be just say not applicable and type it out nice and tidy. Right, that's how we are preparing our working paper. And now we will go and have a look at the bank recon and also at the bank accounts. So back to our Caseware file. We are now going to actually then add not the recons so much, but in this case, we are going to add the bank statements. Now, again, this is not necessarily the way that all firms do it. Some firms do choose to show only the information of the bank statements or only the information of the bank reconciliation. So if your firm chooses to do it that way, that's perfectly fine. What I want us to do, and also as a practice, is to actually add the bank account statements into the Caseware file so that we know how to do that. Okay, so I'll go and look for the bank account statements, which in our supporting documents file is numbers 2, 3, and 4. And I will best practice right-click, and if you want copy or if you want to cut, I'll go and say copy here at the bottom, copy, because then I know the original is still going to be in my supporting documents folder. I will go and find the place where I want this to be pasted. Maybe I'll click on the bank reconciliations worksheet and then right-click and paste. That will then add it below the document that I had highlighted. That's best practice. Why? Because now I know where I told it to go, so I know where to find it. Another way in which to do this could also be, I'm going to show you again how to do that best practice. Let me show you, I want to call it a dangerous practice. If I take my current account statement and I click with my left button on my mouse and I drag it, and I look for where the little black line is going to go. I'm just going to wait until I know everybody can see the little black line. Can you see? And I lift my mouse button. That we call drag and drop. If when I had the little black line there and then just before I lifted my finger from the mouse, accidentally moved the mouse a little bit, okay? It could have dropped it anywhere else, and how would I have known where to go find it? Right, so definitely not best practice to drag and drop. The best practice is to copy, select the item in the folder, select copy or control V if you, control C if you want. Copy, go stand there on the document in your Caseware document manager where you want it to go after that item. Right click, paste or control V, and you will have your bank account, your document in there. Right. So I want to just get an indication from a poll side. You don't necessarily have to have all of those three done, but please just give me an indication as to whether you have at least added one of those bank account statements to your document manager. Now people are saying full stop, full stop, full stop. Is that because you're rather looking at what I'm doing and not doing it yourself? I certainly hope so. I only see 20% of our delegates voted. So please, if you are just following what I'm doing, that's perfectly fine. Then rather use the full stop option. But if you are doing it, then please indicate once you've done at least one bank statement so that I know the majority of people that want to get an opportunity are doing that now. Okay, we are making steady progress. I've got 45% of people indicated to me, I'm following along, I'm happy for you to move along, or yes, I have added the bank statement, you can move along. So I'm assuming we're on 50%, so the other 50% are probably still trying to get it right. That's fine. If you're not trying and I can carry on, please give me an indication by completing the poll. Okay, where's the other 49%? Are you struggling to do it? Or did you fall asleep? I think my voice is too loud. I don't think you can actually fall asleep. So maybe you, I don't know. Okay, we're only on 55%. Can I please get an indication as to whether I can move along? If you are struggling, put in a question. I've got a hand lifted. Monica, I'm not sure what the raised hand would mean, so please add a question for us so that I don't move along without you. Okay, we're only on 58% voted. Those of you that are trying to copy and paste this into the file, I hope you are coming right. Please then indicate to me. I'm on 58%, 59%. Okay, have a look at the polls and just select either A if you are done and ready. If you're just following along, just select the full stop option so that I know not to wait for you. Okay, I'm on 61%. So I'm going to assume, because I don't see any questions coming in, I'm going to assume everybody is comfortable with what's happening, and I'm going to move along. Thank you. Good. So now we've got these three bank account statements in. First of all, if I right click, I need to go to the properties to make sure what is happening here. I need to make sure that I can use this as a working paper. Perhaps you don't like the fact that it's got a 2 in there. You can then change the name to take away the number 2 from the name. What is important is that you must have it as a viewer, internal image viewer set, because that then makes it a working paper. It gives you the ability to work in the document. You can highlight, you can make notes on it, etc. That's how we add PDFs to the file and make them workable documents. Okay. So I'm just going to do that to the first one. You can do those for the other ones as well. Change the properties. Normally, well, the numbers you can change the numbers if you really want to. It would automatically choose the next available one. Make sure just that they're all internal image viewers. They might be, that's fine. And then just something else while we are here. If you are looking at the document properties, the lockdown means that this document will be locked down in the Caseware file. When we lock down the file, this document will be included. Retain on cleanup is before I lock down the file. I will clean up. And let's say, for example, I wanted this bank statement to be in the file so that I can work with it. And the manager can review my working paper with reference to it. He doesn't have to go look for where it is. But when we do get ready to lock down and we do a cleanup, we want this to be deleted. It's just a client document or something. We don't actually want it to stay in the lockdown file as part of our audit evidence. Fine, then you can untick it. Then it won't be retained. Included in the index is right at the top, where it basically gives you an index of every single document included in the file, except if you tick it and say don't show that as part of the index. Roll forward means it will be rolled forward to next year. Now, this type of document, which is a bank statement, we don't want that to be included in next year's file, engagement file, because next year will be a new year with a new bank statement. But we might say, well, roll forward, but roll forward as a placeholder. Then next year, there will be a placeholder to say 423 is for the net bank current account statement. Don't use anything else for 423. And then when I do bring that in, I will replace the full placeholder with the actual document. Okay. Also, if it is a deliverable, let's say like the report to management, something, I can indicate that and indicate the due date, etc. If I was to sign it off as saying I did the planning, or I reviewed it, or I performed the work on this, then you could also sign it off like that, which will be the sign off in your document manager. Okay. In Excel, that won't show in the, it will show in your document manager. Let's say, for example, the reconciliations working paper. If I was to sign it off like that and say performed by, will show there, but because I don't have what's the word, connector, it won't actually show in the Caseware file itself. Where are we now? In the bank reconciliation file, there's no connector, so I still need my own sign off there. All right, so now we have the bank statements recorded, and I'm going to open up the current account bank statement and show you how we are going to audit this. So again, I'm just going to split the screen to make sure we can see everything there is to see. I just want to make it somewhat smaller. All right, good. So you can see now that because it is an internal viewer document, there's automatically headers at the top to say this is wrap up manufacturing, what's the year in, what are we looking at, etc. The planning and sign off and stuff is also included there automatically. All right, so what are we looking at? I can now go in my home ribbon, in the annotations, there's a function for me to highlight. So if I click that, my mouse now becomes a little highlighter. And I can go and say, well, I have checked that this is in the name of wrap up manufacturing. Just click that. Oh, that's a terrible highlight. Sorry, guys. So wrap up manufacturing, highlight there, and I can see, yes, this bank statement is in the name of the client. What is the year end that we have? We are looking at 30 April 2023. So that's the year end. I don't need to make a note to that highlight. What is the balance at year end? Well, the balance on the bank statement at year end is 1004. You can also add notes. Somewhere there's a text box. You can add little tick marks and things and whatnot. You really can go mad on this working paper, as much as it is relevant, of course. Eh? All right. So now you've seen what I do on that side. What are we going to do on our working paper for the bank reconciliation? Right. So if we go, I'm going to be on line line 29, and complete the information as is relevant for this current account. So I will complete, and you're welcome to complete with me, the account number for this account and type. Oh, now I must just type correctly. Current account 11013334. Okay, I'm going to make it slightly bigger just so that you can follow if you need to. What is the balance according to the cash book for this reconciliation? Now we've got to go open up that reconciliation again. I think I still have that recon open. There we go. current account, the recon per the cash book is 853. So first we copy the information from the recon. So that balance is 853,327.12. We'll agree to the balance sheet later on. Are there any reconciling items? Yes, there are. Those 3 items, I'll talk about them just now. The value in there is 151,370.59. Okay. A description, this is creditors payments processed. Okay. What is the bank balance according to the reconciliation? That's that 1004 there at the bottom, 1004,697.71. Good. That's all the information from the recon. And then we're going to go and audit the other stuff. But that's essentially the information from the reconciliation. Now we're going to audit it. First question is, agree this balance to the lead schedule. Is this 853 that the client has indicated on their cash book the amount that we have on the accounting records? Well, do we still have the lead sheet open? I don't know. No, we don't actually, but we can easily open the lead sheet. That's 420. What is the balance for the current account? Well, have a look there. The current account balance at your end, 853,327. That's what they say is in the cash book. So yes, this is the same. So what you can see is if I type an A in that field C29, a little tick mark appears. Now that is really because Webdings is a text format, or a font rather, that has these really cool little images that you can insert. And if you type, you can see there what I'm typing in the little text box. If you type A, it will make a little tick mark, a correct mark. If you type R, it will make a cross. So we quite like to use Webdings as a font to indicate our little tick marks in our working papers. Okay, it doesn't have to be that way. You can do any other way that you prefer, but that's just if you see that we are using little tick marks. I type an A, the letter A, ABC, to indicate a tick mark for the cash and cash equivalents, or for the procedure that was performed. That's procedure 1. Agree the balance to the lead sheet. Secondly then, what other columns are open? Okay, the audit work performed, we will have a look at that just now. The difference, well, this here is where you would have to go and have a look as to whether if you add 853 and 151, do you get the same balance as the balance per the bank statement? And it looks like that if I just sum those two. So there I can then actually use another tick mark, let's say CC for cross cost. Okay, so in other words, the cash book balance plus the creditors problem gives me the 1 million rand balance. Where did I get this balance of 1 million rand? Well, that comes from the bank statement. So because we're going to keep the bank statement in our file for today, that's where the balance is, 1004,697.72. So this working papers reference was 420, what did we call it? 423. See that top right corner of this working paper, 423. So the reference that I will include for my current account is 423. And because the template is already set up, it's already using a red color for the reference. Okay. Did I agree the balance to the bank statement? Yes, we just did that. Also by using that highlight and literally agreeing. I almost want to put my 2 index fingers to the screen and show you, look, there we are agreeing it. But of course you can't see my index fingers. So you are looking at both the 1 millions and going digit by digit, do they agree? Okay, there's a 1 cent difference, all right? That's not the end of the world. You could have indicated that if you want. Otherwise, I'm just going to say that's fine. That's good enough. Is the bank statement in the name of the company? We agreed that initially already, saying wrap up manufacturing, and we are happy. So another A symbol there to say yes, happiness. Okay, we don't know if there's any misstatements identified yet. Let's go and have a look at what was indicated here. Now, I'm going to actually move my bank statement to the left and have a look at the bank recon. So what happened here? I'm going to use my highlighter again. So the client said, creditors' payments processed. Right, there's the payments in the cash book. They processed these 3 creditors' payments on the 30th of April, which is why it went through the cash book then. Okay. However, those amounts only went off, I think it's those 3. Adam Weighing Equipment 7.5, Alston Industrial 6.6, and Anchor Technical 137. They only went off the actual bank account. The money only became less on the 3rd of May. So what was my real bank balance on the 30th of March, which was my financial year end? Was it in fact 853, what my cash book is showing and what is currently used and reflected in my financial statements ultimately, so cash book, trial balance, financial statements? Or is it actually the bank balance according to the bank statement of 1,004,000, blah, 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 blah? I'm hoping that you agree and say, but hang on, those 3 payments hadn't yet gone off. So actually there was more money than 853 in our balance at the end of the year. So our balance should have been R1 million. Right, so what is the impact there? That means that we actually have a misstatement here. And you have a variety of ways to indicate that now, but essentially it's the same as the reconciling items that was indicated, which is the 151,000. You could have added them together any way that you want to get to it. But that's the amount of the misstatement. Okay, now, how are we going to explain to the manager what happened here? How did we decide on that? So a way in which to say this is to say we agreed the amounts to the bank statement. Transactions dated, Payments were made and only processed on 3 May 2023, or you can say 03 and 04 2023. These payments there should therefore not have been processed in the cash book at year end. Something to that effect. So in fact, our balances for the bank is actually missing 151,000. We need to add that 151,000. All right. Let's do a second one, and then I'm going to let you do the last one yourself. So the second one is going to be the call account. Right? Call account 8440 000 Nedbank. Oh goodness, Nedbank call account. What is the balance per the cash book? Cash book is 4 million. There's no reconciling items here. Eh? So it's 4064809.82. We will do the auditing part just now. There's no reconciling items. According to the reconciliation, the balance is 4064809.82. And we will have a look at those just now. Good. Now we're going to audit it. Where is my balance sheet lead schedule? Okay, let me move this across here again. So the Nedbank call account, the balance that I have, 4064. So does the balance per the cash book agree to the lead schedule? Yes, it does. Okay. There are no reconciling items. So I guess that makes sense then, eh? That a balance equals a balance is the same thing. Next question then is, what is the reference for the bank statement that we are using? So going back to the document manager, what are we looking at now? The call account. So that's 422, you see. So if we open that one up, 422, Also at the top right-hand corner, I see the reference 422. Now let's look at this bank statement and audited. I'm going to use my highlighter again. What is the name of the business in which the account is? That's Wrap Up Manufacturing. What is the date? The 30th of April, so the transaction dates, and then the actual date on which items were recorded, that's 30th. What is the balance that we have on the bank statement? The capital balance, this is now a call account, so there's interest and things like that as well. So that's the 4 million. That's the real balance in the bank statement for the call account at year end. So here we can also say 422 happiness. That's the balance per the bank statement. Oh, goodness, now the fixes. The bank statement is in the name of the company, so that's not a problem. However, there is an error here, and I'm going to tell you what the error is, because have a look at what was processed after year end. Remember that step that said look at the payments processed after year end to check that everything that should have been in there is in there. Now have a look at this. The interest capitalized on the 1st of May is 7,699 Rand. Let's think about this. This is the interest that was charged. No, sorry, not charged. This is a call account. We are earning this interest. This is the interest that was earned by Wrap Up Manufacturing on the 4 million. And why is it paid on the 1st of May? Well, it's paid on the 1st of May because it had accrued during April. So the bank only pays us that 7,000 Rand at the 1st of May, but actually we've already earned it during the last month of the financial year. So in theory, this balance of 4,072 should actually be our balance at year end. Even though the money was only paid to us in the new year, we'd already earned that. So that should be a receivable. And so we therefore have a difference of 7,699 Rand and 84 cents of an account amount. Where would you have expected to see this? We would have expected to see this not in the bank statement. It is in the bank statement. It's not missing from the bank statement. It's correctly shown when the money was paid to us. But in the cash book, this should have been recorded as an amount owed to the business, interest earned, but it wasn't. So that's the mistake. So there's no audit work performed on a reconciling item, but we are going to include a note here. And our note is going to say something to the effect of balance agrees to the bank statement. However, the client has not accounted for the interest accrued as at 30 April 23. Refer to note 2 for journal entry. And then we will have a journal entry that we're going to record to fix the bank balance of the client, or a proposed journal entry to fix the client's bank balance. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, the time has caught up with us, so I'm not going to do the last one. We promised, or some of you might have seen, that we are offering a little prize for every session. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to ask you to complete the last one and submit it to, let me just get this email address correct. I'm going to type it here for you as well. Maybe the consultant can just also check that I am using it, the correct one. But it is Caseware. Oh, let me not lie to you now. I think it's Caseware Training. Just quickly going to find it for you because I don't want to. Maybe I don't know if it's Nishal or who's online. Maybe you could just type that for us in the chat, please, while I just finish off the rest of the stuff. So yeah, I think Nishal, if you can just do that for us, I'd really appreciate it. I see it's not Nishal there, but someone else is going to help me to just put in that email address there. But while I'm busy with that, so that what you will have to do is you're going to have to basically complete the working paper for this last step. So that is the overdraft facility. Okay, complete the lines here for that last line and then send your Excel sheet by email to the Caseware training email address. And I will then, by next Thursday, which is the, what's that, the 14th. Okay, so you don't have to do it right now. You will have time until next Thursday, the 14th, to submit it. And then I will choose a winner from that who will then win the Take a Lot voucher for today's session. So you have the Excel worksheet. You can even make a screenshot of the working paper if you wanted to see what we've done up to this point. Remember, there was the one where the error was in the reconciliation, where we had recorded it there, where there was an adjustment necessary. We will actually process an adjustment here. And so my question is the overdraft facility correct? Is there actually a mistake there? Please complete that for us and then send your Excel sheet to that Caseware training email address. And then I will choose a winner from that list of submissions. Okay, but don't go just yet. I need another 2 minutes from your side just to show you the work program. We obviously haven't completed the rest of the work program steps. I was also not planning on completing them because I wanted us to focus on the bank reconciliation. Some of the other procedures will be completed when we look at journal entries, for example. We'll address those and a few of the other ones. All right. Then conclusion we will do at another session. So that's not the end of the world for us. But I wanted us to just spend 2 minutes on the completeness of bank accounts, not because there's such a big risk raised in this case, but purely because there is a lot of confusion oftentimes about how to test completeness. A lot of people expect that completeness is tested through bank confirmations, but it's not. The bank is not going to tell you, hang on, you actually have a missing bank account here. Let me tell you about them. So how do you go about looking for them? Well, actually, you keep your eyes and your ears open all over the place. So you compare last year's list of bank accounts to this year's list of bank accounts and check if any of them are missing. You check with or consider the client's business and say, did they start a new branch and do they normally have a bank account per branch? So maybe I need to look for an extra bank account. You inspect the business's minutes of management meetings, board meetings, to check whether they discussed or approved the opening of new bank accounts. You consider the business lines. If they opened a new type of product, for example, and they launched a new service or a new product or a new area where they are distributing, it's possible that those sales may be going through a separate bank account. So quite possible then that there needs to be an extra bank account. Well, of course, if they show you, no, those sales all go through the normal bank account, then you've confirmed there's no need for a new bank account. You can also consider whether any agreements or covenants were actually issued for any new bank account. So there's a list of examples in the bank statement or in the work program for the bank section. But really, overall, you consider everything across the business and say, does this indicate that there may be a new bank account? Right, and you can then basically just summarize that. If you think about accounts receivable, when the debtors pay the business, where are they paying to? Into that bank account for that bank statement. Do we have this other bank statement recorded in the, oh no, so that must be a bank account that's not recorded yet. Or yes, we see it is recorded. They opened a new account. These ones were all, I think, Nedbank. They opened a new account with ABSA this year. It is on our list, happiness. Or no, actually, when we looked at our lead schedule, there was nothing with ABSA. So it looks like it's missing. Property, plant and equipment. Maybe they sold a big part of their machinery. Where did that money get deposited into? Is that perhaps in another bank account? So it really is about looking want to call it, all over the place. Really knowing your client and understanding where there is perhaps a little red or maybe an orange flag that pops up and says, guys, maybe, just maybe, there is a need to check whether there's not maybe a missing bank account. Okay. So that's the matter there. All right, so that's my story pretty much. What I still just need to do, I can't see that my colleague has added the email address for you yet, so I'm just quickly going to look for that. Just give me a half a second, those of you that want to stand a chance to win that Take a Lot voucher. Please just hang on. I'm going to post it for you just now. So that I know that you can actually get it. Just give me a second. It's not my personal email address, so I just need to find it. I see it's casewareafrica.webinar@adaptit.com. So let me give you, no, that's not the right one. That's not the one that's going to work. Sorry, guys. I'm just going to quickly mute myself and then give it to you. I know you're hanging on a thread here. Let me just quickly find it for you in an appropriate way. All right, I'm not finding what I want to give you, so I'm going to give you that other one. Apologize for being so unprepared now. Copy. So this will then be the one, casewareafrica.webinar@adaptit.com. So that's the email address, and you can then send your Excel sheets to those. Please make sure that you include your name and your surname and an email address, obviously, where I can find you. And then, I see they've now added it. Okay, now I've included two different ones. So I'm going to add another one, which could be really, which is ideally the one that I think would be best. So that I would prefer the Caseware Africa, caseware.training at, oh, no, I'm giving you the wrong one, guys. I apologize. casewareafrica.training@adaptit.com. You see, I need to just focus. So if you've already signed off and you're sending it to the webinar one, I suppose that would be fine. Otherwise, the casewareafrica.training@adaptit.com. Your training reminders were possibly sent from that same email address. So that would be a wonderful. Your deadline will therefore basically be Thursday next week. If you can send that to the email address by then I'll choose one and we will announce it definitely next Friday then in the session. But if you're not there, we will in any case contact you, and I guess possibly even on social media. So thank you very, very much for everybody attending. I really think that we've all worked very, very hard. I hope that you've learned a few things. And yeah, then I just want to say thank you for today. Wonderful to have all of you join me. Yeah, and then I will see you again next week. Right, thank you. I will be around if you've got any questions, so you are welcome to still send any of the questions, but I do believe we have answered all the questions that were necessary, that were submitted. Thank you and have a lovely rest of your Friday. Ladies and gentlemen, I see a lot of attendees still in the webinar. If you have any questions, you're welcome to post them and I will respond to them. But I don't see any new questions coming in, so I'm going to give another few minutes and then I am going to end the webinar. So if you would like to ask a question, please use the opportunity, but otherwise you might get logged off when I close the webinar.